Just want to add a little podcast here on a new paper that came out in Nature Climate Change and actually looks at the potential impacts of AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and so on greenhouse gas emissions and how to synergize those inevitable rise of AI and ML into all aspects of life and climate change mitigation. We talked a bit about cryptocurrencies and their energy consumption in another context here in this course, and AI ML is similar, where incredible amount of computing is involved and you don't even know that it's happening. Every time you're watching TV, calling somebody, looking at messages, cruising on the internet, and so on, they're collecting data, and AI ML is being used to produce individualized information for you so that they can flash things they think you are looking for, or things that they think you may like, news items, products, whatever, movies, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be a big part of life. It already is, but it's going to get bigger and bigger. And the paper basically wants to look at the emissions of greenhouse gases from computing involved in AI and ML, and greenhouse gases emerging from the application of AI and ML, which often are aimed at increasing consumption by offering you individualized, preference-oriented information, ads, etc., travel, and so on, and the systemic changes that may be brought about by AI/ML. We have talked a lot about AI/ML being very critical for improving forecasts, for producing very high-resolution, localized information for food and agriculture and water and health and energy and transportation, planning vacations, etc., etc. All great, but there is always unintended consequences. So unlike the unintended consequences we have had with greenhouse gas emissions, now there are attempts to see what are the things we are doing now and how they may affect greenhouse gases going into the future, and how to avoid those debacles and so on. Okay, so here is the framework for assessing greenhouse gas emission impacts of machine learning, which includes AI and DL, whatever other terminology we use. Alexa, AI is everywhere now, right? We distinguish between three categories with different kinds of potential emissions impacts. Estimation uncertainties and associated decarbonization levers are also shown. Green lines denote effects relating to reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, so you can see many of the green lines here. Magenta lines relate to increase in emissions, so you can see these here, and gray lines symbolize uncertain and or negligible impacts, so there are many places where you have gray lines. Okay, so this one, the colors are there, so you can just pay attention to those. We provide specific category A of this framework in figure 2 and category B in 3, icons adapted from permission from the International Energy Agency. So you have the mixed layer. In oceanography, ML is often mixed layer, so I intuitively jumped. So my brain is doing AI and giving me mixed layer. Anyway, machine learning algorithm, inference, training, and development. So computing related impacts fall in box A. So they are operational and embodied. Every time you're getting an AI input for map, for driving instructions, whatever, you have embedded emissions, embodied emissions in there, and that can of course feed into B and C here. So you have increasing effects on greenhouse gas emissions directly coming out of those with gray lines, which indicate uncertainties or insufficient information or negligible impacts. It feeds into transportation, which has opportunities to reduce emissions and then also reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it can also lead to rebound effects where people who buy a hybrid car or people who take public transportation may more than compensate in other things like consuming too much meat or buying too many things and so on and so forth. So I'm just giving it as an example. So here again, magenta lines going into faded magenta lines. So we go into these domains outside of direct AI, and then there is applications which can have system level impact. So obviously AI is already playing into energy supply and consumer behavior, power systems, lock-ins and path dependencies of the AI with uncertain or negligible impacts. Buildings rely a lot on AI, so there are opportunities to reduce emissions, or there are pathways where emissions are actually increase, and so on. And increasing precision in greenhouse gas emissions estimates can also feed into computing related impacts. And what is B? So those are kind of immediate application impacts. Optimization and substitution is possible, especially if you consider industries with greenhouse gas. Strong wind there. I should close the window. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I leave the windows open because it's comfortable wind, but then it mucks up my recordings here. So I'll check and make sure it's okay. So there are transportation, agriculture, forestry, and other land use, and so on. So you get the idea that AI is used, and it involves lots of computing, which you're not always aware of, and then you're using AI for many applications which have immediate impacts as well. And then the system itself is getting geared to use AI ML outputs, and there are system level impacts which, like smart city, smart agriculture, everything sounds like it's a good thing, but it involves this background of AI which has to be accounted for, especially making sure that there is mitigation going along with it. So this is the example of computing related GHG emissions impacts of machine learning. The ICT sector, so communication technology sector, accounts information communications technology for around 1.4% of GHG emissions today, of which ML probably accounts for a small but unknown share. Unknown share indicated by blue shading here. Computing related impacts of ML can be assessed from different perspectives. Majority of ML related greenhouse gas emissions probably come from computing loads in large data centers, with a smaller share from distributed computing, for example personal computers, smartphones, your smartwatch, your Alexa, your TV, and so on. These greenhouse gas emissions result from both from operational energy use during computation and from other phases of the hardware life cycle, including embodied emissions, which usually you are not aware of. We further break down operational energy use throughout different stages of the model life cycle, with this energy use differing depending on the problem setting and usage patterns. So I don't want to go into too many details, but it's a nice way to look at it. So here we are with global greenhouse gas emissions, other sectors, and ICT sector using about 1.4%. So you have inference run, training epoch, and training run for the ML itself. So in the use phase, data is being collected, so frequency of runs can be very frequent for inferring. For training, the frequent to infrequent use phase, and infrequent to rare phase when it's in development. These are details which are in the paper that you can read up. So in the ICT sector, you have AI related and other ICT technologies. So the AI related is about 1.4, which has embodied and other operational, so large data centers and distributed compute that we are talking about here in terms of your laptop, smartphones, your operation of AC, heating, cooling, other things at home. This is the immediate application impacts of machine learning. Machine learning applications are grouped by their functional and the associated greenhouse gas emissions impacts. ML can both reduce emissions indicated by green here and increase emissions indicated by pink. This diagram differentiates ML applications for addressing climate change in more detail using the findings in reference 7, which you can look up. However, the net effect of those applications addressing climate change versus those accelerating emissions intensive industries right now is unclear and obviously needs a lot of attention. So role of ML: data mining, remote sensing, accelerated experimentation, fast approximate simulations. AI is always trying to facilitate things, do the computing which would be done in other tedious, slower ways, and increase the throughput of useful information. Forecasting, system optimization and control, and predictive maintenance. And the greenhouse emissions impact include pathways with for reducing greenhouse gas emissions or increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Sorry. Policy design, monitoring, and enforcement, for example, greenhouse gas tracking in infrastructure maps. Research and development for low carbon technologies like photovoltaic batteries, planning and design of relevant systems like urban infrastructure and carbon markets, system operations and efficiency like heating and cooling and electricity grids. So we are reducing energy use by using AI, but AI is adding some compute and greenhouse gas emissions. So you have to find ways to make sure in a life cycle sense that you are actually saving much more than you are burning by producing AI information. And you have increasing emissions potentially coming from accelerating emissions intensive activities like oil and gas exploration and cattle farming, which are also using lots of artificial intelligence. Finally, let's look at levers to reduce greenhouse gas emissions impacts associated with ML computing and applications. I won't read all the details, but you can definitely look up the table in the paper. So the lever types including public sector and private sector. Public sector include economic instruments, research and development, regulation, best practices and standards, monitoring and reporting, and capacity building. So associated computing related greenhouse gas impacts include algorithm and infrastructure. So implement economy-wide and sector-specific carbon pricing to incentivize emissions reductions and mitigate rebound effect. And there are, of course, application-related immediate and systematic impacts as well. So when a city becomes smart or agricultural production becomes smart agriculture, you are changing the system to use that information. So there are systemic changes. Okay, so similarly, employ a climate cognizant technology assessment lens with AI strategies and when regulating ML driven emerging technologies. Okay, so things include implement clean electricity mandates, employ regulatory approaches to constrain sector-specific greenhouse gas emissions. Here, for example, under best practices and standards, you can have development and implementation of standardized metrics for evaluating model efficiency, efficacy that include energy efficiency, and application-related impacts could include require meaningful civic and stakeholder engagement in scoping, developing, and deploying ML-driven projects so that people are aware. Implement data governance standards that spur impactful work and are mindful of privacy and ownership. So when data is being gathered, even as you are watching TV or searching on the internet or talking to somebody or driving around, then there is always the issue of privacy and ownership of the data and the information produced. Develop best practices and systematic approaches to weigh benefits and costs for ML applications. Okay. Under private sector, corporate climate action, so it can include adopt organizational carbon pricing strategies that account for both computing and application related emissions. For example, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, including those from cloud computing as well as from products and services. Of course, reduce wasteful model retraining and execution, adjust business models to avoid ML applications that drive greenhouse gas emissions increases, and so on. So these are kind of almost motherhood statements, but how to convert them into regulations and enforcement of those, or how many will be automatically internalized and used regularly by industries and individuals is not clear. But obviously, as ML becomes bigger and bigger part of life, we will begin to have such regulations and norms and punishments coming along. So the paper does provide some guidance in terms of strategies. So here, despite not addressing ML explicitly, general climate policy approaches such as carbon pricing may be effective in driving the development and use of ML in a manner that is aligned, still strong wind, with climate change mitigation. Science policy approaches that foster low carbon technologies may also facilitate uses of ML that enable or improve these technologies, although they may not necessarily address ML specific barriers. To address more technology specific opportunities and risks, it will be important for climate change to become a major consideration within AI innovation and deployment policies, especially since AI/ML is also being constantly applied for improving forecast of extreme events and weather and climate and so on. This includes promoting the research, development and deployment of ML applications that are beneficial to the climate, requiring transparency and accountability for those use cases that could increase emissions or otherwise counteract climate change goals, as well as on computational energy use, and employing climate cognizant technology assessment for ML use cases that are not traditionally within the realm of climate policy. So climate policy framework itself has to evolve to consider AI/ML growth in everyday life and climate use as well. But where decisions today may have important implications for future climate impacts, so employing climate cognizant technology assessment for ML use cases have to worry about not only things that are not in the realm of climate policy now, but where decisions today may have important implications for future climate impacts. Many of the associated policy approaches in Table 1 can be developed and implemented starting today. So this is Table 1, and it has listed a number of ways in which there are levers that can be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions impacts associated with ML computing and applications. So levers require themselves various ways in which to engage the public before using them, and also ways to incentivize them and implement them. There are often knowledge gaps, institutional barriers, and so on, which have to be considered as well. Okay, so just wanted to include it here, a bit longish, but it's okay. It's an important topic, so I'm going to leave it here.